How Kant's one rule solves every moral dilemma. Imagine this: you're standing at a crossroads, faced with a decision that feels impossible to resolve. Maybe it's something small, like whether to tell a white lie to avoid hurting someone's feelings, or maybe it's something much bigger, like a choice that could change the entire course of your life. You feel pulled in different directions. What's best for me? What's best for them? What's the right thing to do? Now imagine a world where there's one clear, universal rule that could guide you through moments like this, a rule so simple yet so profound. It could solve every moral dilemma you'll ever face. That's the promise of Immanuel Kant's philosophy, and his one rule, the categorical imperative, is what we're here to explore. At first glance, Kant's one rule sounds almost too good to be true, right? After all, life is complicated, and morality often feels like a tangled web of gray areas and exceptions. But Kant believed that morality doesn't have to be this way. In fact, he argued that morality is only meaningful if it's grounded in something universal, something that applies to everyone, everywhere, no matter the situation. And this is where the categorical imperative comes in. So, what is it? The categorical imperative is a way of testing whether your actions are morally justifiable. It's a question you ask yourself before you act. What if everyone did what I'm about to do? Would the world make sense? Would society still function? Would it be a world you'd want to live in? If the answer is no, then your action is morally wrong. It's that simple. But don't let the simplicity fool you. This rule has profound implications. Let's break it down. Imagine you're tempted to lie. Maybe it's a small lie, something harmless like telling a friend you're busy when you're really just avoiding them. You might think, what's the big deal? It's just one little lie. But Kant would challenge you to think bigger. What if lying became a universal law? What if everyone lied whenever it was convenient? The entire concept of truth-telling would collapse. No one would trust anyone anymore. The communication itself would lose its meaning. So, by lying, you're not just breaking a rule, you're undermining the very foundation of human relationships. This is why Kant's philosophy is so revolutionary. He doesn't focus on the consequences of your actions, like whether lying makes someone feel better or gets you out of trouble. Instead, he focuses on the principle behind your actions. It's not about what happens after you act, it's about whether the rule you're following could logically apply to everyone. This is the key distinction for Kant. Morality isn't about outcomes, it's about consistency and integrity. Now, let's pause here for a moment. How does this sit with you? Do you agree with Kant that morality should be based on universal principles rather than personal preferences or situational outcomes? Or do you think there are times when the ends justify the means? Be honest with yourself, because this question cuts to the heart of how you navigate the world.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Here's another example to consider. Imagine you're in a desperate situation where stealing could save your life. You might think, well, this is different. This is survival, but Kant would still ask you to universalize the action. What if everyone stole whenever it benefited them? Would society still function? Would property rights mean anything? The answer, of course, is no. So for Kant, even in extreme situations, stealing would still be morally wrong. Why? Because morality isn't about making exceptions for yourself. It's about holding yourself to the same standard you'd expect from everyone else. And this is where Kant's philosophy gets uncomfortable. It forces us to confront the ways we justify our actions. How often do we tell ourselves, this is okay, because my situation is different? Or it's just this one time? Kant would argue that these justifications are a slippery slope. If we allow ourselves to make exceptions, we're essentially saying that the rules don't really matter, that they're just suggestions. not principles. And once we go down that road, morality loses its meaning. But let's not misunderstand Kant. He's not saying you have to be perfect or that you'll never face morally complex situations. What he's saying is that morality is about striving for consistency. It's about holding yourself accountable to a standard that transcends your immediate desires, fears, or circumstances. It's about asking yourself, what kind of world am I helping to create with my actions? Am I contributing to a world of trust, fairness, and respect? Or am I making it harder for those values to survive? Let's take another angle. Think about promises. Imagine you're tempted to break a promise because keeping it feels inconvenient or difficult. Maybe it's a promise to show up for a friend, to complete a task, or to stay faithful in a relationship. Kant would ask, what if breaking promises became a universal law? What if everyone broke their promises whenever it suited them? The concept of a promise would lose all meaning. It would no longer be something people could rely on. And once again, by breaking your promise, you're not just letting someone down, you're eroding the very principle that makes promises possible. So, what's the takeaway here? Kant's categorical imperative isn't just a rule you follow, it's a lens through which you view your actions and their impact on the world. It's a way of keeping yourself honest, of ensuring that your choices align with the kind of person you want to be and the kind of world you want to live in. But let me ask you, how often do you think about your actions in this way? How often do you pause and ask yourself, if everyone did this, what would happen? And more importantly, are you willing to live by that standard, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable? Because here's the hard truth: morality isn't about making life easier. It's about making life meaningful. It's about choosing principles over preferences, integrity over shortcuts, and truth over convenience. Kant's philosophy challenges us to think bigger, not just about ourselves, but about the world we're shaping with every decision we make. So, the next time you're faced with a moral dilemma, don't just ask, what's best for me? Ask, what if everyone did this? Would the world be better or worse? That's the power of the categorical imperative. And that's why Kant's one rule has the potential to solve every moral dilemma we'll ever face. Why intentions matter more than outcomes? Let's take this deeper. Kant's philosophy doesn't just give us a rule to follow, it fundamentally changes how we think about morality. Most of us, when faced with a decision, tend to focus on the outcomes. We ask questions like, will this make me happy? Will it help someone else? Will it fix the problem? But Kant flips this thinking on its head. For him, morality isn't about the consequences of your actions. It's about the intentions behind them. Now, this might sound strange at first. After all, aren't outcomes important? If lying, for instance, saves someone's life, doesn't that make it the right thing to do? But Kant would argue that this kind of thinking is dangerous. Why? Because it reduces morality to a game of calculations, one where we justify questionable actions as long as the end result seems good enough. And when we go down that path, we lose something essential: the integrity of our actions. Here's how Kant sees it: you can't control the outcomes of your actions. Life is unpredictable, and even the best intentions can lead to bad results. But what you can control is your decision to act according to principle. And for Kant, that's what makes an action moral, not whether it succeeds, but whether it's rooted in a consistent, rational principle that could apply universally. Let's break this down with an example. Imagine someone steals money, but they use it to feed their starving family. The outcome might seem good, they saved lives, but Kant would say the action is still morally wrong. Why? Because the principle behind the action, stealing, can't be universalized. If everyone stole whenever they felt justified, trust in property and ownership would collapse. The very system that allows people to survive and thrive would fall apart. So, even though the thief's intentions might seem noble, the action itself fails the test of the categorical imperative. Now, this isn't easy. Freedom, in this sense, requires discipline. It requires stepping back from your immediate desires and asking yourself, what kind of person do I want to be? What kind of world do I want to help create? These questions aren't comfortable, but they're necessary, because without them, we fall back into the chaos of selfishness, inconsistency, and moral shortcuts. So, let me ask you, what's controlling you right now? Is it fear, desire, social pressure? And what would it look like to take back control, to live not by impulse, but by principle? That's the kind of freedom Kant believed in, and it's a freedom that changes everything. So, let me ask you, how much of what you do is guided by principle, and how much is guided by the outcomes you want? When you're faced with a difficult choice, do you ask yourself what's right, or do you focus on what's easiest or most rewarding? And perhaps the deeper question is this: are you willing to act with integrity, even when it costs you something? Kant's philosophy challenges us to rethink what it means to be a good person. It's not about being perfect or never making mistakes. It's about striving to act from a place of principle, even when it's hard, because at the end of the day, morality isn't about what you achieve, it's about who you become. The freedom in following principles. Here's a paradox that might surprise you. Kant believed that following strict moral principles actually makes us freer. At first, this sounds counterintuitive. How can sticking to rigid rules that don't bend for comfort or convenience lead to freedom? Isn't freedom about doing what you want, when you want? But Kant would argue that this kind of freedom, the freedom to follow your desires, isn't freedom at all. It's a form of slavery. Think about it. When you act based on your impulses, whether that's greed, fear, or even temporary happiness, you're not in control. Your emotions are controlling you. You're reacting to what feels good or bad in the moment, rather than acting out of reason or principle. In that state, you're no better off than a puppet being pulled by invisible strings. True freedom, Kant believed, comes not from doing whatever you feel like, but from acting according to principles you've rationally chosen for yourself. This is the beauty of the categorical imperative. It's not an external rule imposed on you by society, religion, or authority. It's a principle that you, as a rational being, can discover for yourself. And when you act in accordance with it, you're affirming your own dignity and autonomy. You're saying, I am not controlled by my desires. I am capable of living according to reason. But here's what makes Kant's idea of freedom so profound: it's not just about you. When you act morally, you're not only respecting your own freedom, you're respecting the freedom of others. Every time you treat someone with honesty, fairness, or kindness, you're recognizing them as an equal, as a fellow rational being who deserves the same dignity and respect that you demand for yourself. Now, this isn't about being heartless or ignoring context. Kant isn't saying we should ignore human suffering or act like robots. What he's saying is that morality has to be grounded in something deeper than emotions or situational judgments. It has to come from a place of reason, because only reason gives us a standard that applies to everyone equally. And this brings us to one of the most profound insights of Kant's philosophy. Morality isn't just about what you do, it's about why you do it. If you help someone because you want praise, or because you feel guilty, or because it benefits you in some way, then your action isn't truly moral. It might look good on the surface, but it's not grounded in duty. True morality, for Kant, means doing the right thing simply because it's the right thing to do, not because it's convenient or advantageous. Building a life worth respecting. What kind of life do you want to live? not in terms of material success, fame, or comfort, but in terms of the kind of person you want to be. What will you stand for? What values will guide your decisions? These are the questions Kant's philosophy forces us to confront, because at its core, Kant's categorical imperative isn't just about solving moral dilemmas, it's about building a life you can respect, one decision at a time. Imagine for a moment that your life is a book. Every action you take, every choice you make, adds another sentence, another paragraph, another chapter to the story. The question is, when you look back on that story, will it be one you're proud of? Or will it be filled with compromises, excuses, and moments where you took the easy way out? Kant believed that living a life worth respecting starts with recognizing one simple truth: every action you take helps shape the world we all live in. When you lie, cheat, or act selfishly, you're contributing to a world where those behaviors become more acceptable. On the other hand, when you act with honesty, fairness, and integrity, you're creating a world where those values thrive. It's not just about you, it's about the ripple effect of your actions. This is why Kant's philosophy is so empowering. It reminds us that we have the power to influence the moral fabric of the world. Every time you follow a principle, even when it's hard, you're making a statement: this is the kind of world I believe in, and I'm willing to fight for it, even if no one else does. And that's what makes morality so powerful. It's not just about following rules, it's about taking responsibility for the kind of person you are and the kind of world you're helping to create. But let's get practical. How do we apply this in our everyday lives? Start by asking yourself the hard questions. Am I acting in a way that I'd want others to emulate? Am I treating people not as tools to achieve my own goals, but as ends in themselves worthy of respect, dignity, and fairness? These aren't easy questions to answer, but they're essential if you want to live a life guided by principle. Let's say you're faced with a decision: should you cut corners at work to get ahead? It's tempting. Maybe no one will notice. Maybe it won't hurt anyone directly. But if you universalize that action, if you imagine a world where everyone cuts corners whenever it benefits them, what happens? Trust erodes. The quality of work suffers. The system collapses. So even if cutting corners feels harmless at the moment, it fails Kant's test. And more importantly, it chips away at your own integrity. Or consider something as simple as keeping a promise. Maybe you promised a friend you'd help them move, but now you're tired and don't feel like it. Breaking the promise might seem minor, it's just one friend, one afternoon. But what happens if breaking promises becomes universal? The concept of trust falls apart, relationships weaken, and once again your action contributes to a world where commitments mean less. Here's the hard truth Kant forces us to face: every decision matters. Every action, no matter how small, is a reflection of the principles you live by, and over time, those principles shape who you are. So if you want to live a life worth respecting, you have to start by respecting your own principles, even when it's inconvenient, even when no one is watching. But here's the reward: when you live according to principle, you gain something far more valuable than comfort or convenience. You gain self-respect. You gain the ability to look in the mirror and say, I acted with integrity. I lived in alignment with my values. And that kind of peace, knowing you've done the right thing, even when it was hard, is something no amount of money or success can buy. Kant believed that living morally isn't about being perfect, it's about striving. It's about recognizing that you're not just one person among many, you're part of something bigger. Every choice you make contributes to the kind of world we all live in. And the question is, are you willing to take responsibility for that? Are you willing to act not out of fear or desire, but out of respect for the moral law, the law you give yourself as a rational, autonomous being? So, as we wrap up, let me leave you with this. If your actions today were to set the rules for tomorrow's world, what kind of rules would you be making? Would they create a world of trust, honesty, and respect? Or would they lead to chaos, selfishness, and betrayal? The choice is yours. Kant's one rule, the categorical imperative, isn't just a test for morality, it's a call to action. It's an invitation to live a life of integrity, to take responsibility for your choices, and to help create a world you can be proud of. The question is, are you ready to answer that call?